Thank you.
Okay, if that's my cue to go. So fantastic, let's get cracking, shall we? So I will share my screen with you in a moment, but I thought that first I should introduce myself. So my name is John Bridge. I am an 11 plus and year 5 tutor. I have over 7 years of experience in various interactions with children. I've worked at schools, I've worked as a private tutor, I've worked in kind of intensive education schemes. So I've got loads of experience, and what I'm going to be delivering to you guys today is a reading comprehension seminar. So reading comprehension is one of the more complicated parts of the 11 plus, and it's something that I think is worth really drilling down into and really getting to focus on. So that's what we're going to be doing today. There will be time for questions, as I believe Deepa's already mentioned. There will be time for questions at the end. So for the moment, save your questions. Maybe if something pops up, just write it down, because we can come to that at the end of the seminar. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you guys now. If anyone's having problems seeing it, please just send a message through on the chat and we can make sure that that's working. So sharing my screen. Okay, fantastic. So like I've said, I've already introduced myself, so we'll move straight on. So first things first, I want everybody to be taking notes. So we've only got an hour and I'm probably going to be talking quite quickly. So for you to be able to get the most out of this, it's a good idea if you've got a pad and a pen so that you can note down everything that it is that I'm saying. Because some of this stuff can be a little bit technical, some of this stuff can be maybe kind of more complicated and is worth just noting. If you are a young person who is going to be taking the 11 plus, this is just as important as if you're a parent who's watching kind of in lieu of their child. Because if you're a parent, then what the notes that you take means that you'll be able to help your child. And if you're a kid, this means that you are really going to be focusing on everything that I'm saying. So let's head on. First things first as well. I want everybody to check whether or not you are CEM or GL. What is CEM or GL? So there are two types of 11 plus in the UK. Number one is CEM and number two is GL. More or less, they are the same. They have roughly the same skills requirements. They have roughly the same kinds of questions. They take roughly the same amount of time. Obviously, they're both 11 plus. They're at the same age, but they vary across parts of the country, and they vary in terms of exactly specifically what it is that they're asking out of students. So before we proceed, I just want to highlight that today is going to be focusing very specifically on CEM 11 plus, which means that the questions may be slightly different to GL 11 plus English questions. And that's not a problem because the skills that you get today will apply across all of the 11 plus programs that you could possibly encounter. However, just keep in mind that if you are doing GL, then you should make sure to try to transfer the things that you learned today more specifically into the questions that you'll be getting for GL. And also keep this in mind when you are applying for schools, because as you guys are going to be applying, the books that you need to buy, the preparation you need to do is going to be dependent upon whether or not it's CEM or whether or not it's GL. So just very quickly, I just do want to highlight as well that the reason I've chosen to focus on CEM for today is because it has a much larger focus on comprehension overall. So it's something which I think is probably better suited for a talk on reading comprehension. Okay, getting into it. So what are we doing today? First, I want to have a look at what comprehension questions you will be finding at 11 plus a really quick review of literary techniques. So later on, I believe next week, we'll be doing a kind of specific seminar on literary techniques. For the moment, we will just be doing a very quick overview. If this is something which you maybe struggle with, something which your child struggles with and which they need to learn a little bit more about, keep in mind that you always have the option to attend this second seminar and really learn about that as well, because today we're just giving a real overview. Anyway, so we'll be going over what comprehension questions you will find, having a look at each different type. Then we're going to do a step-by-step guide of how to get the comprehension questions right. Some of the comprehension questions, to be honest, are fairly simple. And the ones that are simple, we can go over just bish, bash, bosh, look at how to answer them, look at the clearest method of doing it and move straight on. Some of them are much more complicated and we'll be spending a little bit more time on those. Like I said, if you have any questions, if you have any doubts about those, then save those for the end, make a note of them with your pad and pen, which you've hopefully grabbed, and you can ask me at the end when we've got about 5-10 minutes for questions. Okay, and finally, we'll be going over some general tips on how to succeed on the exam. So I think that this is something which is often kind of glossed over. Often a lot of tutors will just teach you how to do each exercise and not teach you really how to tackle the exam. But exam technique, knowing how to kind of play the game, is one of the most important things that can help you succeed. And it really helps because you can have really, really intelligent children that aren't able to succeed because they don't have their exam technique, even if they know how to do all the questions. Okay, so very, very quick review of literary techniques. Number one is onomatopoeia. So onomatopoeia, as we can see right here, is where you have a sound, word, which sounds like the noise which it makes. So I'm thinking boom sounds kind of like an explosion, right? Or zap sounds like a lightning bolt, or poof sounds like something vanishing into midair. So onomatopoeia is very literally just this. It's a word which sounds like the sound which it is describing. Bang, crash, wallop, etc. In the chat, just to make sure that I know you guys all have it, would you please be able to type out if you have, so I can see a hands raised. I'm not going to be responding to raised hands just for the moment. So we'll be doing that right at the end. But what we will be doing is I would like you guys to fill the chat if you have any other examples of onomatopoeia that you might want to share with us, and we can see if anyone has any good recommendations. Let's have a look. Oh, sorry guys. Let's have a check. Have we got any examples for us in our chat? Okay, so no one seems to have any. Oh, yep. Okay, there you go. We've got one. Boom. Yeah, boom is correct. Bang is another one. Crash. There you go. Yes. Okay, so we got a few. Yes. So as we can see, pretty simple. Anything that sounds like the noise that it makes, you got onomatopoeia. Moving on. Alliteration. So what is alliteration? Pretty simple. Alliteration is just when you have the same sound. So for example, K in Krispy Kreme, D in Dunkin' Donuts, C in Coca-Cola, P in PayPal, when you've got the same noise, which is coming up multiple times. That is alliteration. Super simple. We're not going to spend any more time on it, and we're going to head straight on. Next one, what are metaphors and similes? Okay, metaphors and similes are basically very, very, very similar. But a metaphor is when you are describing something as being something else. And a simile is when you're describing something as being like something else. So we can see the contrast here. Her heart is like gold. You're saying it's like similar to gold. And you've got her heart is gold. You're saying it is gold. Obviously, a metaphor is not literal. It doesn't actually mean that her heart is made of gold, but it's kind of a way of describing things. So he is a pig versus he eats like a pig, for example. That's another really good one. Okay, so one more, personification, which is where you use a concept of, you kind of make a thing and you give it personal traits. So let's look at this one, for example. My heart danced when he walked in the room. That's a really good one. Or my brain is not working fast enough today. Obviously, your brain can't actually work, right? Your brain isn't putting on a suit and a tie and going into school to do a day of work, and nor is your heart getting up and doing a jig. It's a way of describing things that happen. And it is in a way a bit of a metaphor, but we separate them. So we have similes, metaphors, and personifications. Why do we need to know these? Two reasons why you guys need to know these. Like I said, we can go into much more detail on them in another seminar. But first of all, they do come up in the exam. So both in CEM and GL, you will be asked at points to identify what kind of literary device is being used. So you'll be given a sentence, for example, my heart is like gold. And you'll be asked, is this alliteration? Is it simile? Is it onomatopoeia? Is it metaphor, etc.? And you'll need to know that. So if you know that, then you'll be able to get the marks. However, number two is that they create effects, is what we say. So by create effects, I mean that they give an impression or they give an idea of how a character is feeling or a situation. So in a moment, we're about to see a passage from Harry Potter. where the character Nearly Headless Nick, who's a ghost, is said to be steaming from the ears. So obviously someone isn't actually steaming from the ears. When people are really angry, they don't actually have, you know, hot steam coming out of their ears. But we use that as a metaphor to describe how angry a character is, that they're almost like they're a kettle that's boiling over because they're seething with rage. So knowing how effects can be created with literary devices helps us understand what's going on in a paragraph, what's going on in a passage, which is then useful when it comes to reading comprehension. So I'm just going to very quickly go back over these. If anyone wants to jot any of these down before we move on. So onomatopoeia is going to be noises or words which sound like noises. Alliteration is going to be using the same letter a lot. So Dunkin' Donuts, Coca-Cola, PayPal. Metaphor is going to be this thing is this thing, whereas simile is this thing is like this thing. And personification is saying that inanimate objects, so an object like a heart or hair, can stand or can dance, giving it human traits. Okay, moving on to our types of questions, which, as I promised, is the meat of today. So we're going to have a look at each of the types of questions in just a second. And we're going to go through each one. I'm going to very briefly explain what each one is before moving on to have a look at some examples with that paragraph I was just speaking to you about from Harry Potter. So the first one which we will see is which word best describes. So which word best describes, what will happen is in your paragraph, maybe you'll have a character that's very upset, or you'll be able to tell from reading the paragraph that the character is upset. And the question will be something along the lines of, which word best describes how Hermione is feeling? Is she A, very sad? Is she B, hungry? Is she C, angry? Or is she D, going to the gym? Right? And you'll have to think which of those words best describes how Hermione is feeling based on what we've read in the paragraph. Okay. I'm actually going to move, oh wait, no, so let's have a look. Okay, so number 2, which of these statements is true? So that is going to be, you're going to have to really closely read the paragraph and find out which of the following statements, which of the following sentences are correct. So I might tell you, for example, I have 3 oranges. That can be your kind of fake paragraph. And then I might say, I have a piece of fruit. I have 2 dogs. I have 3 sandwiches. The one which you know is true is the one which follows from that first sentence that we've seen. So for example, it says, I have 3 oranges. That means that I do have a piece of fruit. So that's something that's true. Okay, why do you think is going to be something which is a little bit closer analysis. So again, you're going to get a paragraph. They're going to say, why do you think that Hermione is sad? And then you're going to have to look in the paragraph. You're going to have a couple of options of why she might be sad. And you're going to have to say which one's correct. How do you know? Same sort of thing. We'll get to that in more detail. Finding the facts in the passage might be, for example, how many footballs does this character have? And you'll have to have a look somewhere in the passage. It will say, you know, Ron had 20 footballs. Closest meaning to is one which is a little bit more complicated. We might spend a bit more time on that. So closest meaning to is where you will be asked to say what the closest meaning, what word from a list is the closest to a word which you've seen in the paragraph. So for example, in the paragraph, it might say sad, and then you might have the options of, you know, upset, upset, very sad, terrified, or hungry, or something like that. And you'll have to pick the word which is closest in meaning. Okay, number 7, spotting literary devices. We've sort of already been over this, so I'm going to move straight on. That will just be, is this alliteration? Is this onomatopoeia, etc. Number 8, spotting parts of the sentence. I actually think I probably need to show you that one for you to understand it properly. And number 9, what does this phrase mean? This one is probably the hardest one. And again, I think I need to show it to you for you to understand. So let's get straight on. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be focusing on a paragraph of, a little passage from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Very specifically, a discussion between Harry Potter. I know this is a picture of Hermione. Apologies, I couldn't find a good photo of Harry. Having a conversation with Nearly Headless Nick, who is this man, played by John Cleese in the movie. who has died as a result of being hit over the head with an axe. And now is quite upset because he's not been allowed into a club of headless ghosts because he's unfortunately nearly headless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to show you this passage now. And I want you to read it really slowly. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes and I'm going to read it out in a loud voice so that you guys can all follow it. And then we're going to do some comprehension exercises of these questions on this passage. So take your time. You can either follow along with me, or if you really want to, you could maybe mute me for a minute. However it is that you want to do it. I'm going to start reading this now. Just really try to focus, maybe take notes if there's anything that you don't understand, any word that you don't know. If you're a young person who's attending this seminar, maybe you can ask your mum or dad. If you're older, Google is probably your friend. Okay, so understanding the language in texts. Hello, Nick, said Harry Potter. Hello, hello, said nearly headless Nick, starting and looking around. He wore a dashing plumed hat on his long curly hair and a tunic with a ruff, which concealed the fact that his neck was almost completely severed. He was pale as smoke, and Harry could see through him to the dark sky and torrential rain outside. Nick looked incensed, and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. I'm seriously suffering, sucker. I can't stop thinking about how angry I am, Potter. You would think, wouldn't you, he snarled suddenly, ripping the letter back out of his pocket, that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the headless hunt. I won't forget this for as long as I live. I've been waiting to join for forever and a day. Harry rolled his eyes. It was the third time he'd heard the very same rant. These ghosts need to get a life, he thought, not realizing the irony of his statement. Okay, so I've now read it out to you. I'm going to give everyone probably another minute to just very quickly look over this. Just really check that they've completely understood everything. Like I said, we're not taking questions at the moment, but just to make sure that you've fully read everything that's here. Maybe reread a small portion if you don't 100% understand, because we're now getting into the questions section. Okay, we're going to move on. So we're going to see a series of questions now, which are the questions which you guys are going to come up with. I want you to think about them as we go before we actually see what the options are. So like I said, if you are a young person that's with their parent, maybe you can discuss it with them. If you're on your own, just have a think about it yourself. I'd maybe think about writing it down if you kind of want to remember it or something like that. So first one is going to be which word best describes how Nick is feeling. The second is going to be which of these statements is true. You guys aren't going to know this one, so don't worry too much. Why do you think that Nick is in a bad mood? Maybe have a quick conversation if you're next to somebody, why you think that Nick might be in a bad mood. Remember, Nick is our ghost. How do you know that Harry is bored by Nick? So do we know that Harry is bored by Nick? And if we do, what is it in the passage which is telling us that Harry is bored by Nick? Next one. Finding the facts in the passage. How many sentences does Nick say in the whole passage? So I won't expect you guys to know this one because I think you'll probably have to look at the passage to work this one out. But maybe just have a guess. Just have a think to see if you can work out what it might be. Okay, the next one. How many times was Nick hit in the neck with a blunt axe? So you might remember this. If you don't remember it, there's probably no way that you're going to be able to guess. But if you do, then like I said, scribble it down. Closest meaning to. So in the passage, Rowling says that Nick is incensed. Based on your reading, which of the following words has the closest meaning? So maybe have a quick think about what incensed might actually mean. Okay. Spotting literary devices. You guys might be able to get this one straight away. Nick says, I'm seriously suffering, sucker. Which of the following devices does this employ? Remember which ones we had. We had onomatopoeia, alliteration, metaphor, simile, and personification. Spotting parts of the passage. We're not obviously going to look at this one because I've not said which of the following is not mentioned in the text because you can't actually see it just yet. Okay, and next, what does this phrase mean? In the passage, Harry says that ghosts need to get a life. What does this phrase mean? Thinking about the context of the passage to help you work that out. So again, I'm going to give you guys maybe just kind of 10 seconds to have a conversation with whoever you're next to, or just to think about it and write down what you think it might be. Okay, so like I said, I do want you to try this at home. So right now we're going to go through and we're going to have a look at how to answer these. So I've seen that some participants have raised their hands. Like I said, we're not actually going to be responding to questions at this moment. So we'll be doing that at the end of the class. I don't want your answers just yet. I want you guys to be answering at home. You don't have to tell me. So just try to work it out in your head. Just make sure that you're focusing and trying to get the answers whilst we're talking through this. So yeah, like I said, I don't need you to tell me, but I do want you to work it out. Okay, so the first question is, which word best describes how Nick is feeling? And we have 4 options: hungry, angry, blue, and scared. So I think we should go and have a quick look at the passage to make sure which one we think it might be. Let's have a look. So the tips that I have for you here, guys. Number 1, what is your instinct? So what do I mean by that? What do you reckon the answer is? If you just look at it, if you think about it in your head, what do you think the right answer is? So that probably, if because you've probably got quite a lot of experience reading, you're probably just going to know. So if you really do know, then you can probably just run straight to part 3. Let's say we don't know. In that case, we want to go to number 2. So like I said, I can see some hands up. I don't want answers. Like I said, we can have a conversation at the end of the class, but if there's raised hands, I'm not going to be able to get to you, okay? So number 2, I want you guys to reread the passage. We'll get the opportunity to reread the passage very quickly in just a second, and that's if you don't know. And then number 3, can you find a sentence to prove your point? So let's say we think that Nick is hungry. We'd need to find a sentence which has Nick saying, I really want a burger right now, for example, something that suggests that he is hungry to back up what we want to say. So let's have a look. So I have a bit of an idea of what I think it probably is, and I think it would be based on this sentence. I can't stop thinking about how angry I am, Potter. So I'm going to go straight ahead and say the answer, guys, is probably that Nick is angry, right? I don't think he's blue. I don't think that blue is even an emotion. Hungry, it doesn't say that he's hungry at any point. It doesn't say that he's terrified. So probably the answer is angry. So we followed that there. You maybe didn't have your instinct that he was angry, so you went and we reread the passage. And we found when we reread the passage, I can't stop thinking about how angry I am. And that was our sentence which proved our point that he was angry. So that is how you do the first kind of question. We're going to move on because I want to do every single one of these questions. So which of these statements is true? Number 1, Nick is a completely headless ghost. Number 2, Nick has been admitted into the headless hunt. Number 3, Nick is wearing some fashionable headgear. And number 4, Nick is as pale as a cloud. Okay, so the tips for these guys are, number 1, check the sentence against the passage. So what do I mean by that? If you think that a sentence is right, then you need to get it, you need to read it, and then you need to read the passage to see if it says in the passage the same thing as it says in the question sentence. So for example, Nick is a completely headless ghost. We're going to have a look at the passage. So it says that he's nearly headless Nick. which means he's probably not completely headless, right? So when we know that that sentence is wrong, we cross it out. So we can cross out number 1. Now, let's maybe go for number 2. Nick has been admitted into the headless hunt. Should we have a look? So it says he's been waiting to join for forever and a day. You would think that getting hit 45 times in the net would qualify you to join the headless hunt, but he's angry. So that suggests that probably he's not been able to join the headless hunt. So we can cross that one out. Number 3, I'm going to throw it out there, guys, is probably the right answer. So this is a little bit of a difficult one, but really concentrate. Hello, hello, said nearly headless Nick, starting and looking around. He wore a dashing plumed hat on his long curly hair. So dashing means very good looking, means really cool looking, right? So when we say he's wearing some fashionable headgear, I'd say that's probably right. So I think 3 is going to be our right answer. And then we always want to double check our answers. So Nick is wearing some fashionable headgear. We've seen that it says he's got a dashing plumed hat. I reckon that's probably the right answer, so we can move on. So what you guys have to keep in mind is that sometimes you will come up with some slightly difficult things where it doesn't say it directly. So right here, it says he's wearing some fashionable headgear. And right here, he says it's a dashing plumed hat. We have to guess a little bit based on what we can read that that's right. So we want to find some evidence in the passage, but you don't necessarily always know 100% what's going to be correct. So you do sometimes just have to guess a little bit. Okay, next one. Let's have a look. Okay, so now sometimes, guys, you can get questions which are untrue. So the question will be, for example, which of these statements is untrue, is not true? So with these, it's the exact same process, but just make sure that you really focus on what the question has been asked, because often this is a real point where people get stuff wrong. Is they'll think, oh, what stuff is true rather than what stuff is untrue, and then they'll get the wrong answer. So just have a real check. For here, we've got, for example, Nick is not a completely headless ghost. We know that that's true, so we can cross that out. Nick hasn't been admitted into the headless hunt. We know that that's true. We can cross it out. Nick is wearing a hat. We know that that's true, so we can cross that out. Nick is a dog. Does anybody think Nick is a dog? I would say probably not. I think it's probably a ghost. So that is going to be our right answer because it's the only one which is untrue. Okay, next one. Why do you think that Nick is in a bad mood? Guys, I think we're going to try and pick up the pace here. So get your thinking hats on. Make sure you're writing. Why do you think that Nick is in a bad mood? Number 1, he's upset because he's dead. Number 2, he was hit 45 times with a blunt axe. 3, the other ghost won't let him join the headless hunt, even though he's essentially headless. And number 3, which you can't see because I've been moving my mouse around, he's going to be rejected from the headless hunt. So number 1 step, are any obviously wrong? I would say there are some that are obviously wrong, right? He's upset because he's dead. He's been dead for quite a while. It's not like nearly headless Nick is sad all the time. He is going to be rejected from the headless hunt. Probably also quite obviously wrong, right? We know that he's already been rejected. So number 2, he's probably not sad because he was hit 45 times with a blunt axe, because that happened quite a while ago. So that really does narrow it down to 3. But let's say that we couldn't just cross them out like that. So then you want to see, is it obvious? Does a character say that thing? So let's say Nick said, I'm really sad because they won't let me join the headless hunt. If we could find that, we're quids in. We've already got the answer. But let's say you can't find that and you have to imply it. So to imply something is kind of like to make a clever guess. So it's to have a look at what you're reading and see if you can kind of read between the lines to get some information there. So here, for example, we've got, he's really angry, he's snarling, he's ripping the letter out, and he's saying he should have qualified to join the headless hunt, but we know that he hasn't. So by reading between the lines, we can tell that he's upset because he's not been allowed to join the headless hunt. So one more thing, guys, is that there might be more than one which is kind of right. I put kind of right here. So that means 2 which seem like they might be right. I would say 3 and 4 might be right here. So we've got here, the other ghost won't let him join the headless hunt. And then number 4, he's going to be rejected from the headless hunt. Make sure you really read these properly. And also make sure that there's what is called a causal connection. So make sure that the sentence causes the thing. The sentence causes how the character is feeling or why something has happened. So here, for example, it makes sense that the other character won't let him join. So then that has caused Nick to be sad. So we know that it's probably not 1. He's probably not upset because he's dead, because when we think about it, has him dying caused him to be sad? I don't think so. Has him being hit 45 times with a blunt axe caused him to be sad? I don't think so. So we can cross those out, and that helps us really narrow it down. Number 5, I sometimes find, is if you're really struggling, drawing a quick picture of the one which you think is right can help you get it in your head and really think about whether or not it's caused or has not caused it. Okay, so next one, how do you know? So how do you know that Harry is bored by Nick? Here are the tips for these ones, guys. Number 1, are any obviously wrong? So let's have a look. Because Harry stares through Nick to the rain. I don't really know why that would suggest that he was bored, right? Or let's say number 2, because Nick won't stop going on. That might be kind of right. So we're going to say, I think we can cross out number 1. Now let's have a look at 2 and 3. We're again going to have to do this thing where we're seeing if we can imply and working out which ones are kind of right. So let's think, because Nick won't stop going on. That's kind of right, I would say. Nick is just ranting, and he's ranted to Harry 3 times. So Harry's a little bit like, okay, come on, quiet down there, buddy. Number 4, because Harry thinks that Nick needs to get a life. That also kind of suggests to us, right, that Harry is probably a little bit bored of what Nick's saying. But you can be angry at someone as well and tell someone to get a life. So I think we can probably, so you might say, you need to just, Nick, you need to get a life. You need to think about other things, whether or not you're bored. So the real one that's going to tell us is because Harry is rolling his eyes, because we see that someone rolls their eyes. Does someone roll their eyes when they're bored with something? 100% yes. We know that that is going to be the right answer. So remember, guys, like I said, that it's often really hard to tell which one's the right answer. So these aren't obvious. In fact, you might be sitting there saying, Johnny, I don't know which one's the right answer. I wouldn't have guessed that it was number 3. And that's why you just have to be really careful to read this stuff and check and double check and triple check. Again, I've not put it here, but it might help to draw a picture to get the idea in your head. And what you finally want to check for is a close causal connection. So again, we're talking about that cause. So we're thinking, what signals to me, the reader, that I know this thing? So I might see that Nick or Harry tells Nick to get a life. That doesn't necessarily prove to me that Nick is sad. Whereas there's a cause. The second I hear that Harry's rolled his eyes, I'm like, okay, Harry's bored by Nick, obvious. So it's really close and obvious. Okay, next one, everybody. So finding the facts in the passage, like I said, we're trying to pick up the pace here. So how many sentences does Nick say in the whole passage? Who knows? 6, 7, 8, or 4? See if you can guess. So the trick here, read the question. What specific part of the text is it asking for? So here it's asking for sentences. It might ask how many semicolons, how many sentences does this person say, how many exclamation marks are there, how many times does this character speak, etc. And then get a tally going. So a tally, like I think you guys all will know what a tally is. It's like ticking off every time you see something. So every time, for example, now that we see a sentence that this character is speaking, we're going to tick it off. And then at the end, just double check to see if you've made any mistakes. So let's go through. How much does Nick speak? So hello, hello. This isn't the end of a sentence because we've not seen a full stop. So we're going to jump to the next thing he says. In fact, I think we might be able to put a thing here because he doesn't follow on from that, does he? He then says, I'm seriously suffering, sucker. So I think we've then got 2 sentences. Now, I can't stop thinking about how angry I am, Potter. Full stop, 3 sentences. You would think, wouldn't you? And then it's a comma, he's still speaking, that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the Headless Hunt. 5 sentences. I won't forget this for as long as I live. 6 sentences. I've been waiting to join for forever and a day. Oh, sorry, so that'd be 6 sentences, apologies. We have 6 sentences here, which nearly Headless Nick has spoken, and we've counted that. So if you guys at home have taken a tally, then you'll know that that's the case. And what we need to do here is we then just need to double check. So we need to go over again. We need to go, hello, Nick. Okay, so that's obviously Harry. That's not Nick speaking. Hello, hello. That's the first one. Then we've got, I'm seriously suffering, sucker. That's the second one. Then we've got, I can't think. That's the third. Then we've got, you would think, wouldn't you? That blah, 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 blah. That's the fourth. And I've been waiting to join for forever and a day. That's the 5th. And then also, guys, we missed out this little one here, which would be the 6th. So that is 6 sentences again. And we know that that's right, so we can move on. That's the right answer. So remember, guys, specific part of the text they're asking for, we're looking for sentences. Then you want to get a tally going, and then you want to double check, because it's very easy to make mistakes. Even I often make mistakes. Okay, this next one, I think you guys are definitely going to get this because we focused on this so much. How many times was Nick hit in the neck with a blunt axe? These ones are easier. These are the easy finding the facts in the passage questions. And I think you guys know this already, don't you? So is it 45, 4 to 5, 14, or 5? Let's have a look again. Look at the specific part of the text that it's asking for. It's asking you to look at him being hit in the head with the blunt axe. Number 2, cross off the wrong answers and then put a question around any where you're uncertain. So let's go to this. I think we can find it right here. Getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe. So we think it's probably 45. If you're really confused, you might want to put a circle around 425, but I think that's definitely wrong, right? So we know our right answer, job done. Next one, guys, closest meaning to. So in the passage, Rowling says that Nick is incensed. Based on your reading, which of the following words has the closest meaning? So we need to find where it's said incensed. So we need to see what specific part of the text is it asking for. Oh, sorry. So I think I've not put quite the right bit here. So I'm just going to explain this to you because there's a bit of a glitch going on with the presentation. So what you want to look for here, guys, is you just want to read the passage really closely and you want to see which of these words you could substitute in, you could swap in to the same place. So let's go to the passage and we've got here, Nick looked incensed and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. What we want to do is we want to take this word, each of these words, and slot them in the place of incensed and see if any of these make sense. So Nick looked alight and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. I don't think that that's right, so I think we're going to cross that off. Next one, Nick looked smelly and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. Again, probably not smelly, right? So let's cross that one off. Next one, number 3, Nick looked instant and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. Don't get tricked by the fact that instant and incensed sound the same because they just don't mean the same thing, right? So it'd be like duck and dock or something like that. You've got to make sure that the word makes sense if you swap it out. So number 4, furious. Nick looked furious and it looked like he was steaming from the ears. This whole thing is about how angry Nick is, right? So Nick looked furious is probably going to be the right answer. So we're going to circle that one. That's going to be our right answer. The only thing I have to say is if you're a little bit confused and you're struggling to tell which one would be right, just circle a couple of them which might be right and then come back to it later and cross off the one that you think is wrong. Okay, spotting literary devices. You guys already know this. Nick says, I'm seriously suffering sucker. Which of the following devices does this employ? This, you don't even really need any tips for this, guys. You just got to look, what kind of thing is it? If you've learned your things properly, we don't even know what a soliloquy is. We don't know what irony is. We don't know what personification is. It's probably going to be alliteration, right? Sir, like Krispy Kreme, like Dunkin' Donuts, Coca-Cola, sir, going to be alliteration. Okay. Finally, we're going to do spotting parts of the sentence. Which of the following is not mentioned in the text? This one's a little bit difficult. So this, guys, just requires you to read it really, really, really carefully. So first thing, it's all about instinct. So let's have a think about what our instinct is here. My instinct here is that it probably doesn't mention that Nick, so it probably does mention that Nick and Harry have a conversation. We know that that's the case, don't we? We also know that Harry rolls his eyes. We've spoken about that loads. So the question really is, which of these ones is going to be wrong? We can cross these two off and we're down to 1 and 2. It's nighttime at Hogwarts or nearly headless Nick is see-through. Let's have a look. So when we get, let's have a look if it says anywhere that nearly headless Nick is see-through. He was pale as smoke and Harry could see through him to the dark sky and torrential rain outside. So guys, do we think the nearly headless Nick is see-through? I'd say yes. So it is mentioned in the text, right? Which means that number 1 is going to be the one that's wrong. So this is the best way to do this, everybody, is make sure you go through all of them and work out which one is wrong by crossing off all the ones that are going to be right. So it's like a process of elimination. That's what we call that, where you work out all the ones you're like, no, that's definitely wrong. No, that's definitely wrong. No, that's definitely wrong. Okay. Finally, guys, what does this phrase mean? This is the very last one. This I cannot give you really a lot of tips for, but I'll do my best. So Nick is dead and will be happier alive. So in the passage, Harry says that ghosts need to get alive. What does this phrase mean? Thinking about the context of the passage. Number one, Nick is dead and will be happier alive. Number two, Nick has lost his life and must find a new one. Number three, ghosts are so boring that it's like they're dead. And number four, Nick must stop focusing on insignificant things. So again, let's have a look. Are any completely obviously right or wrong? Then you want to imagine the character says the phrase. Does it work or not? So let's think about Nick saying, I am dead and I would be happier alive. Does that seem like what Nick's saying when he's talking to us in the passage? Then is Nick saying, so let's, for example, think that Harry is saying, ghosts are so boring that it's like they are dead. Does that seem like it's what Harry is saying? Or are we saying, Nick must stop focusing on all these insignificant things in his life? So if you read it out, you imagine the character saying the phrase and see which one sticks out to you as being right. Then you want to read the sentence where it comes up. So you guys need to check the sentence where it comes up. So Harry rolled his eyes. It was the third time he'd heard the same rant. These ghosts need to get a life. So he's talking about how he just needs to stop focusing on this. He needs to stop thinking about this. So I think, guys, it's going to be Nick must stop focusing on insignificant things. But honestly, that is just what my gut is saying. And the problem with these questions, guys, is you've got to go with your gut. You've got to go with what you think is going to be the right answer, not what you can tell. Because with this sentence, right, when it says get a life, it's not really obvious what get a life actually means. And so kind of almost all of these could make sense. So the only way you're going to know is just by going with what your gut tells you is what the sentence is saying. The main trick for this one, guys, is to make sure you do a lot of reading. So that's a bit of a weird one because it's not an exam tip, is it? Because you can't in the exam whip out a bunch of books and start reading Shakespeare and everything. But that's not the point. What I want you guys to be doing is before the exam, read, and read, so that when you see these phrases, you've seen them before. You've seen someone say get a life. You've seen it's easier for someone to get through the eye of a camel of a needle, right? That's another phrase where you might say you've seen someone saying a bunch of these funny phrases that come up in English in a book. So then when you see it, you already know what it means and it's going to be easy. Okay, very quickly, a note on phrasing. These questions do not always look like this. Sometimes they will have slightly different sentences. Okay, everybody, we are heading on to our next section. So we're going to do finally some more top tips, which is just how on the day of the exam, you guys can smash it. And also before the exam, how you can make sure that you are doing well. So this, if there's any parents in the audience, really make a note of these because I cannot stress how important these are. Number one is reading and vocabulary. So kids and parents, if you are not reading or if your child is not reading, they will really struggle to pass the English 11+. And that does not just mean every now and then reading a short passage of Harry Potter in a seminar. I'm talking about at least once every other day, you or your child needs to be reading a couple of pages of a book. It is the best single way to get better at English because when you are young, your brain is like a sponge. You will pick up new words, new ideas, and you'll be able to comprehend English by reading a book. Because what is reading but comprehension? You are reading a passage and understanding it. So this is crucial. If you are getting up to the exam and you're still struggling with vocabulary, however, I would also recommend vocabulary lists. So that would be before the exam. You want to be maybe in the 2-3 weeks before the exam. You can Google key vocabulary for the 11+. Try to learn about 20 words per day. Just practice. You don't need to know how to spell them. All you need to know is what they mean. But this is really essential. Vocabulary and kind of a broader understanding of the meaning of English is absolutely essential. This is probably my main tip for how you can do well in your English and a verbal reasoning 11+. Number two is going to be practice. And this both applies to kids and parents. So Before your exam, you should have done at least 10 papers. So this is not particularly difficult, guys. You can buy books with a million bajillion papers online, and you just got to get through them. So second, make sure you're doing them in timed conditions. It is no help to do an 11 plus paper over 3 hours when you only have 60 minutes on the day. And finally, make sure that you are practicing with your kids to start. So not only should your kids understand how to do the questions, but you should understand how to do the questions, because then you can help them when they get stuck. And obviously, kids, if you're the ones who are listening, ask your mum or your dad to help you with these tests, because this is what's going to help you. If you're struggling, if you don't understand someone, there's someone who is very smart, who lives in your house, who will be very good at these questions, and they are called mum or dad. Okay, there's a bunch of opportunities. There's a bunch of materials you can get online, like I just said. Twinkle, 11 plus exams, BBC Schools Spell It is great for improving your vocabulary and your spelling. You got the Bond 11 plus books, you got the CGP 11 plus book, which are my favorite. Like I said, a million practice exam books. And finally, you've also got tutors and parental guidance, right? So here we've got two kind of options, which we've spoken about. I think that a lot of kids really, really benefit from a tutor. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in the profession, right? But obviously, also, parents are key. A tutor alone is not enough. Even if your kid has the best tutor in the world, if their parents are not behind them, if they are not there to help them when they don't understand the question, the tutor's not on the job, they will not succeed. So it's really important that your parents are constantly helping out and helping to direct your learning for the 11 plus. Okay. Next thing, this is kind of really directed to the parents. So if you're a kid, you maybe don't have to focus on this one too much for the moment. So when you're helping children understand stuff, you have to break things down. Remember that young people often really struggle with those concepts because they've not yet grasped the basic concept. So it's like if you tried to tell someone to do long division when they've never even done basic division, or you're trying to teach someone to do really complicated multiplication before they even know how to add. If you're trying to explain to your child how to do an exercise, you need to first explain what the exercise even is. Maybe give them a really easy version of that exercise for them to work out, to start getting their head around, and explain each mental step that the child has to take in order to get the right answer. And also, don't forget about videos. Videos are fantastic. You can go on YouTube and look up how to do this question, right? And you'll have a million videos which are great for kids because it really keeps them engaged, which will explain. Okay, top tips on how to smash the exam on the day. We're getting very short of time, so I'm going to go through these super quick. I've just got two. Number one is get a watch. So you only have about 60 minutes. It does vary between GL and CM. It does actually vary sometimes between schools, but you only have a max of 60 minutes really for your 11 plus English and verbal reasoning 11 plus. That means that you are very time constrained. And if your kids know how to use a watch, if they can see, wow, I probably spent 5 minutes on this question, I need to pick up the pace, then they're going to know how to perform. Something that is so common is really bright kids don't succeed because they'll go and they'll think that they're doing fantastically, and it will get to 60 minutes and they've gotten 50% of the questions right, but that's because they've only gotten halfway through the paper. So this ability to work at speed is something that's very important. I'd also just like to note that if your child does have any learning difficulties or they require any learning adjustments, this is something you should communicate to the school long in advance. Do not let yourself be prejudiced because your child is dyslexic or your child is dyspraxic or whatever it might be, just because you've forgotten to speak to the school long in advance about the school taking kind of consideration of their needs. Okay, and probably digital is best. Obviously, in school, they'll be learning how to use one of those complicated watches with the round faces and everything. But to be honest, it's a lot easier to read a digital watch, and they're a lot cheaper. So if you can get a cheap Casio type digital watch, that's the one I would recommend, because it doesn't require really any too much thought during your exam as well. And finally, I believe this is my last one. Sorry, everybody. So the final thing is, don't make the exam into a monster. A million studies show that young people and adults and everyone perform best when they are relaxed and when they know that they have to perform, but they aren't stressed. So if you make the exams into something that your young person, or if you as a kid are terrified about the exams, you just won't do as well as you could have done if you're relaxed, if you were chilled. So do make sure that you chill out, that this 11 plus is not the be all and end all. It's not the most important thing that's ever going to happen in your life. And whatever happens, you'll still be fine. So obviously it's really important to work hard, but do not get too caught up in how you achieve on this exam, because although it's important, if you've worked hard, then you will do as well as you should do, and it will not be a problem for you. And really the thing which could mess you up on the day of the exam is just getting too stressed about how you're going to do. Okay, everybody, that is everything I have to say. So I want to go to questions and concerns now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This gives us about 5 minutes, and everyone's going to have the opportunity to put some things in the chat. So let's have a quick look. So I'm just going to be able to see in the chat if anyone is asking anything in particular, and we can see if anyone's got a question. I don't want you to turn anything, I don't want you to kind of turn anything on just yet, or to turn your mics on, because I'm going to respond to questions in the chat. Okay, so looking at our first question from Prasant Elavasi, what is the meaning of rant, irony, concealed, and incensed? I think that was quite early on, so I'm just going to say, again, often you won't know the words that actually come up. This is why reading is so important, why vocabulary lists can be useful, and also just trying to infer from context. Okay, any reading lists you can recommend for year 3 and 4? So I would say that this is something which is best referred to HUNARly. I believe they have a very specific reading list which they recommend to children of different ages. I have a number of possible suggestions, but I probably would prefer to defer to them on that question. Okay, so my child has been doing bond and CGP. Is there a recommendation question bank? Is there a recommendation question bank? So typically, if you have the bond or CGP books, then you'll be able to access their extra materials online. Typically, they will come with a kind of password to be able to access additional stuff. Beyond that, after this, you are going to be sent materials which should forward you through to a question bank. Alternatively, you can also just purchase more 11 plus books, which are not specifically the bond or CGP ones. You can look up the bond and CGP exam books, which are pure exams and don't necessarily have the explanations, but will essentially function as a question bank. Or there are countless resources online, which obviously I showed earlier in the lecture. Any recommendation for vocabulary building for year 5? Yes, my primary recommendation is, honestly, I know I've said this a million times, is to read. I cannot stress enough, I really cannot stress enough how much that children that read perform better on their English and verbal reasoning 11 plus by a country mile. It is not funny how big the difference is. Apart from just doing vocabulary lists, learning sort of 10, 20 words a day, which is not very fun, is really a last ditch effort to make sure that your kids are learning before the exam. The best thing that I can recommend is just that you have the chance to read. Pick a book that your child likes and make sure they are reading it every single night before bed. Okay, let's have a look. What if you have a find and copy and you can't find the answer? So sorry, would you be able to just slightly elaborate on that question, Lithia? I'm not 100% sure what it is that you're asking. Rina, do you do webinar for standard comprehension questions, not multiple choice? I believe that that is something that you'll need to ask HUNARly directly. I believe that we may be doing that at some point, but it's also something which I've not discussed with them, and I wouldn't be in charge of organizing. Do you think Harry Potter is 11 plus standard? Yes, I would actually say that Harry Potter is fantastic for 11 plus standard. The later books are actually almost slightly more complex than 11 plus. Harry Potter is good. You've got, for example, Artemis Fowl is fantastic, potentially slightly higher if your child already has a high level. Alex Rider as well for young boys is also really good, or young girls if they like their kind of action type books. Okay. Let's have a look. Does anyone have any more questions? What about Cold Walder's Quest? I've actually not heard of that book. I would probably just give that a Google, honestly, Paran. I imagine that there will be a number of parents that will have chimed in on whether or not they think it's 11 plus level. Are there any more tips? So in terms of more tips, beyond what I provided you, I would probably say that the main tip is getting exam practice in. So something that really throws a lot of really intelligent young people is that they'll come and they'll be on the day of the exam and they've just not done enough practice, and they look and they're smart and they're good kids and they should be doing really fantastically well, but because they've never done any of these tests before, they just get a bit confused and they get a bit thrown by what it is. So if your kid's done 10 practice exams before they even sit down and do them, and they've maybe done 7 of them in timed conditions, it's going to be a piece of cake, and they're going to be so used to it that there's going to be no stress around it, and they're going to be completely familiar with all the questions that might come up. So honestly, my other tip would just be get that practice time in. Make sure you're doing practice exams. Can I please write the names of the books, please? So we are now at the end of our time. I'll very quickly explain them. So the first one is Alex Ryder, Alex space Ryder. The second one is Artemis Fowl. That's Artemis space FOWL. And the third one is Harry Potter, which I'm sure you guys know how to spell. Okay, so that is the end of our seminar. If you have any more questions, I would direct them to Deepa, who is the person who is kind of in charge of running this seminar. Now we're going to move on. I'm going to forward you over to her. And thank you very, very much for listening. That is everything. You've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for all your brilliant questions, and I hope that this has helped.
Thank you, John. And you have not seen the poll results over there that we have conducted, but everyone is loving the information that was shared today. Thank you for all your efforts and being so enthusiastic about children's learning and making sure you definitely make sure to mention that not to be stressed. It's more about the learning, isn't it? Thank you, John.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
And those who are interested in having the assessment with us, please WhatsApp now so that we can send you the online link for the assessment for year 4 and year 5. Year 4 is at 4:15 and year 5 is at 5:15. The assessment is mainly for those who are interested in 11 plus coaching with HUNARly. And John is one of our teachers who is for the year 5. And so definitely messages, we'll have the assessment now. Thank you. We will leave this chat open for some time so that if there's anything that you can pick up just for a minute, yeah? We will also be having some courses, 8-week sessions for creative writing, reading comprehension by itself, instead of having the full intensive coaching. So, thank you. So we are closing the session now. And if anyone is looking for the phone number of WhatsApp, we have emailed you. Please have a look. Thank you. It was lovely having all of you and hope it was informative.